Hello, my fine students. We're going to start a unit on percents today. And we're going to start it by looking at some of the ways that we hear about percents in the world. So you might hear that a shirt is on sale for 10% off, or that the school population increased by 20%. Rhode Island has a 7% sales tax. The measles vaccine is 97% effective. I earn 2% interest on my bank account. There's a lot of percents in banking. Ryan wants to leave a 15% tip. 14% of M&Ms are yellow. And 71 of the Earth's surface is covered in water. What does that mean? Well, for instance, let's take a look at this one. If 14% of M&Ms are yellow, what that means is if we have 100 M&Ms, 14 of them will be yellow. Or for this one, if 71% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, if we could divide up the Earth's surface into 100 equal parts, 71 of those parts would be covered in water. So when we're talking about percents, we're really talking about how much out of 100 parts. So let's take a look at a few examples. So right here I have 100 squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And since 10 times 10 is 100, each of these models has 100 little squares in them. So here I shaded 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 out of 100 is 4 hundredths. If we were going to write that as a decimal, it would be 0.04. And since percent means out of 100, this would be equal to 4%. Now, I don't want you to copy down the models and the shading. That would be too much work. But I would like you to write down that 4 hundredths as a fraction equals 4 hundredths as a decimal, which equals 4%. Let's take a look at this one. Well, this has 2 whole rows of 10. So that will be 20 out of 100. That's 20 hundredths as a fraction. And the way we write 20 hundredths as a decimal is like this. And this is all the same as 20 out of 100 is 20%. How about this one? I've got 1, 2, 3 full rows plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. How much is 3 tens and 5 ones? It's 35. So we have 35 hundredths. There's the fraction, which equals 0.35. There's the decimal. So what percent of this is shaded? 35%. I tell you what, let's skip these last two just in the interest of time. Maybe we'll come back to those later. So I want to look at the methods that we have for converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. And we'll practice each of these together. So for instance, to convert a fraction to a decimal, we do numerator divided by denominator. And you definitely need to write this down. So actually, let's back up. Converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. That title should be on your page. And fraction to decimal, you need to write numerator divided by denominator. If you want to write out the words, it looks like this. Numerator divided by denominator. You also could write it like this. Numerator divided by denominator. All good stuff. Okay, if we want to change a decimal to a percent, you can just multiply the decimal by 100 and voila, it's instantly the percent. And if you want to go back from a percent to a decimal, you just divide by 100. Now, this is probably the hardest one. To change a decimal to a fraction, you need to read it aloud, then you write what you heard yourself say, and then you simplify. I'll explain more about that in a minute. So let's start with the first rule. Let me cover up this extra stuff I have. There we go. So on numbers 1 through 4, let's look at the directions. We're going to change fractions to decimals, which is numerator divided by denominator. So I'm going to take my calculator. If I'm trying to convert 3/20ths, I'm going to do 3 divided by 20. And let's see what I get. 0.15. So I can just write 0.15. I'm not too worried about that 0 point. Let's look at number 2. So if I want to write 7/25 as a decimal, again, I need to take my calculator. I'm going to clear it. I start with my 7. I'm dividing by the denominator of 25, and I get 0.28. So it seems kind of weird, but 7/25, 7/25 means the same as 28/100, and 3/20 means the same as 15/100. Let's take a look at 9/10 now. So again, I'm starting with my numerator and dividing it by the denominator. So it's 9 divided by 10 equals 0.9. There we go. 9/10, equals 9/10, of course. Remember, if I've got 7/10, we write that as 7/10. Let's do 13/50. So again, I'm going numerator divided by denominator. If you want to think about it like this, by all means. So 13/50 means 13 divided by 50, which equals 0.26. And how do we read this value out loud? That is 26/100. So 13/50 has the same value as 26/100. Okay, let's work on to the next section. In this part, and let me just fold this back so we're not too busy here. In this section, we're going to change decimals to percents. And I love changing decimals to percents because it's so easy. I just have to multiply by 100. So, how do I read that? Is that 16/10 or 16/100? That's 16/100. If you've got 2 decimal places, we're talking about hundredths. So I want to take my 0.16 and multiply it by 100. So 0.16 times 100 equals 16. And it's not just plain old 16, it's 16%. So I take the decimal equivalent, I take the decimal value, I multiply it by 100, and that will give me the percent. 16/100 means the same as 16%. Let's do this one. So I'm going to take my 0.8, and again, to convert a decimal to a percent, I simply multiply by 100. And I find out that 8/10 equals 80%. All right, next one. 0.84. So I'm taking my 0.84, I multiply that by 100. That gives me 84%. Are you seeing a pattern? The numbers in the decimal always appear in the percent. Sometimes there's an extra, sometimes there's a 0. This 0.8 turned into 80%, so it's not always an exact match the way it seems to be here. Sometimes it can be a little different. Let's look at this one, 0.03. So to convert my decimal to a percent, I'm saying 0.03 times 100, which equals 3%. All right, you're doing it. You're converting between fractions and decimals and percents. Let's take a look at the next section. Now we're going to change percents to decimals. All right, so to change a percent to a decimal, we divide by 100 and we also pull out that percent symbol. So let's see what we've got here. 37%. So to change this to a decimal, I do 37 divided by 100, which equals 0.37. Well, that came out nice and neat. 37% equals 37 hundredths. Let's try 5%. So I'm taking the 5, and to convert that to a decimal, I divide by 100, and I end up with 0.05. And that's what 5% means. It means 5 hundredths of something. I could even write that as a decimal, as a fraction, 5 hundredths. These all mean exactly the same thing. I would need to simplify that, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, let's try changing 61.7% to a decimal. So I'm taking my 61.7%, I divide that by 100, and I get 0.617. How do we read this decimal? That would be 6/10, just that 0.6 right there. That would be 61 hundredths. But when there's a third decimal digit, we're talking about thousandths now. So this is 617 thousandths. Let's do 11%. So I'm taking my calculator and I take my percent of 11. I divide that by 100 and I get 0.11. So 11% means the same as 0.11 or 11 hundredths. Okay, so here to me is the hardest one, but you are going to do a nice job with it. Let's see if I can get myself. Oh, I like this. Okay, so we're working on the purple part here. In order to change decimals to fractions, first we will read the fraction aloud. We will read the decimal aloud. Then we write what we heard ourselves say. And then it's time to simplify. So let's see what this means. So read. How do we read this? We could say 0.05, but this is really 5 what's? 5, not 5/10, 5 hundredths. 5 hundredths, just like we set up here. And when we simplify this, and I'm hoping that your calculator will do it for you. Let's see what my calculator does, if it's going to simplify it for me. If I do 5 divided by 100, nope, it doesn't. It's going to give me the decimal equivalent. So to simplify this, I'm going to divide top and bottom by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So I take a decimal of 0.05. I read it out loud and I wrote what I heard myself say. So I read it, I wrote it, and then I simplified it. Let's look at number 2. So how do we read this out loud? We could say 0.2, But the real mathematical way to read it is 2 tenths. 2 tenths. So this says 2 tenths and this says 2 tenths. If I want to simplify, in this case, I can divide top and bottom by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Kind of running out of room there. So 2 tenths has the same value as 1/5. Let's look at number 15 now. All right, how do I read this out loud? Because to change a decimal to a fraction, I read it aloud, I write what I heard myself say as a fraction, and then I simplify it. So let's see, that would be 1/10. That would be 13 hundredths, and that is 131 thousandths. And you will be happy to know that that fraction cannot be simplified. Let's look at this one. 0.27. What's the real mathy way to read that? 27 what? 27 hundredths. So I'm going to say 27 hundredths, right? 27 hundredths equals 27 hundredths. So there's actually no independent work for today. I just wanted us to get through these samples, and we did. I will look forward to seeing your good work. Take care, kids. Happy day.